Continuing from last chapter, Xiao Yan was preparing to receive the inheritance of the Tuoshe Ancient Emperor. Gazing at the radiant lotus seed suspended above the sea of flames, Xiao Yan couldn't suppress the surge of excitement in his eyes. In the current continent of Do-Chi, the so-called source energy had long vanished, which also meant that no one could ever ascend to the level of Do-Di again. The Soul Clan's Emperor of the Soul had acquired the imperial-grade primordial pill, granting him the opportunity to step into the realm of Do-Di. For Xiao Yan and the allied forces, their only hope now rested on the ancient inheritance of the Tuoshe Ancient Emperor. In the present age, to reach the Do-Di level, only two methods remained: the imperial-grade primordial pill and the ancient inheritance, both containing the last remnants of source energy in this world. My inheritance requires a heart as steadfast as a boulder. As long as even a single thought persists, it will never perish. The Tuoshe Ancient Emperor looked at the excited expression on Xiao Yan's face and smiled faintly. With a light flick of his finger, the resplendent flame lotus seed slowly descended, hovering above Xiao Yan's head. Xiao Yan took a deep breath, quickly calming his mind. Any stray thoughts were swiftly banished with unwavering determination. The flame lotus seed emitted a strange glow as it slowly descended, piercing through Xiao Yan's scalp and sinking into his head. The moment the flame lotus seed entered his body, Xiao Yan's skin turned crimson. An overwhelming, terrifying energy spread through his body at an alarming speed. In the blink of an eye, his meridians swelled painfully, and an intense tearing sensation surged from within. Sweat poured from Xiao Yan's body like a torrential stream, his frame shrinking dramatically in mere moments. His already slender figure now resembled nothing more than a scrawny monkey, skin and bones. As sweat cascaded like a waterfall, Xiao Yan's face twisted in agony. The excruciating pain distorted his features beyond recognition. Watching this scene, the Tuoshe Ancient Emperor remained impassive. If Xiao Yan couldn't withstand even this initial stage, the idea of receiving the inheritance was nothing more than a joke. In the sea of flames, Xiao Yan's body trembled violently. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open, only to explode into a mist of blood. As his eyes burst, explosions echoed throughout his body, and his frame was forcefully torn apart by the overwhelming power of the inheritance. The Tuoshe Ancient Emperor's brow furrowed slightly. Now was the true beginning of the inheritance. However, if Xiao Yan failed to achieve what he had been told, not only would the inheritance fail, but his physical body and even his soul would suffer severe and possibly irreversible damage. Did I fail? Xiao Yan's soul gazed at the spreading blood mist, feeling waves of weakness emanating from the depths of his being. The sensation made him want to drift into sleep. But just as this urge emerged, Xiao Yan jolted awake. He knew he was in extreme danger. If he succumbed to sleep now, even his soul might gradually dissipate into the void. My body is too weak to withstand the power of the inheritance. But now that my body is destroyed, how can I absorb the energy? Xiao Yan's soul condensed into a transparent sphere of light. He was caught in a dilemma. Without a body, he couldn't absorb the inheritance's power. But refining a new body required countless intricate steps, and he simply didn't have the time. A heart as steadfast as a boulder. As long as even a single thought persists, it will never perish. The sphere of light flickered wildly. Yet, in this moment of extreme urgency, Xiao Yan's anxiety and fear began to subside. The words of the Tuoshe Ancient Emperor echoed in his mind, and suddenly, he seemed to understand something. As Xiao Yan reached a moment of realization, the soul light sphere he had transformed into began to flicker intensely. From within his soul, a brilliant radiance began to emerge. It was the flame lotus seed. As the radiant light shot out, the dispersed blood mist began to eerily retract. What followed was a miraculous sight. The blood mist rapidly condensed, enveloping the soul light sphere. In just a few short breaths, the mist reformed into a living, breathing body. With his body reconstituted, Xiao Yan was overjoyed. He could feel that this newly formed body was even stronger than before. Creation from destruction, continuously regenerating the body to adapt to the power of the inheritance. Xiao Yan's eyes gleamed with a hint of excitement. However, his excitement didn't last long. From within the flame lotus seed, an even more terrifying power was released, so immense that it made the heavens tremble. Under this overwhelming force, Xiao Yan's newly formed body exploded into a mist of blood once again, and this time, even his soul experienced searing pain. A heart as steadfast as a boulder, and it will never perish. Now enlightened, Xiao Yan no longer panicked. He maintained his focus, allowing nothing to disturb his composure. As Xiao Yan's soul and mind became one, the blood mist that had exploded once again condensed, forming a body even stronger than before in the blink of an eye. In the sea of flames, a series of low, muffled sounds echoed as Xiao Yan's body repeatedly went through a cycle of destruction and regeneration, as if he were caught in a perfect loop. Witnessing this, a faint smile appeared on the face of the Tuoshe Ancient Emperor. He nodded gently, acknowledging that Xiao Yan's insight was indeed remarkable. No wonder he had reached this stage at such a young age, and more importantly, his steadfastness and resilience were commendable. It seems my mission is nearing its end. The Tuoshe Ancient Emperor smiled lightly, his tone carrying a subtle sense of release. Time flew by during cultivation. Unknowingly, a year had passed in the blink of an eye. Throughout this year, Xiao Yan had experienced countless cycles of self-destruction and rebirth. Even with his immense willpower, his mind had become muddled, with only a sliver of clarity guarding his soul. It was this single-minded determination that drove his body to gradually adapt to the power of the inheritance through these repeated self-destructions. Yet, the grueling training seemed endless, a never-ending cycle of destruction and rebirth. A year in the heavenly tomb equated to only 2 months on the continent of Tuoshe. During those 2 months, the central plains were thrown into extreme turmoil. The grand formation set by the Soul Clan enveloped the entire central plains, turning it into a death zone where one could enter but not leave. The once blue sky was now shrouded in thick blood clouds, casting a dim light over the land, creating an oppressive atmosphere that weighed heavily on all who dwelled there. The scent of blood permeated every corner of the central plains. Periodically, blood rays would shoot out from the blood clouds that blanketed the region, leaving a trail of corpses and rivers of blood in their wake. This was a true catastrophe. In the beginning, the various sects and factions were furious at the Soul Clan's actions. However, when they banded together to attack the Grand Formation, only to have 2/3 of their forces wiped out by a single blood ray that pierced the heavens, their anger turned to fear. Only then did they realize the Soul Clan's methods were unimaginably ruthless and powerful. Facing the blood rays that occasionally descended and bathed the land in blood, countless sects and factions had no choice but to relocate their entire organizations. Naturally, their destination was the headquarters of the Sky Mansion Alliance. At that time, the only place in the Central Plains capable of withstanding the blood rays erosion was the area surrounding the Sky Mansion Alliance's headquarters. In less than a month, the area within tens of thousands of miles around the Sky Mansion Alliance had become densely packed with people. Every inch of space was filled with a dark mass of individuals, and the entire Central Plains had fallen into utter chaos. The Alliance, overwhelmed by the influx of sects and factions seeking refuge, could do nothing but unite with numerous powerful experts to create a massive defensive shield that covered 100,000 miles around the Sky Mansion Alliance. Even so, space within the shield was still insufficient. Many sects, in their struggle to maintain their safety zones, clashed violently with others, leading to numerous casualties. However, the Alliance could do nothing to intervene in such conflicts. They had already reached their limit. With death looming over them, any semblance of order had completely disintegrated. Meanwhile, the coalition, led by Gu Yuan and Zhu Kuan, attempted to thwart the Emperor of the Soul's plan to use the life force of all living beings to complete the Imperial Grade Pill. Yet, despite their efforts, they failed. The Grand Formation, bolstered by the life force of countless beings, and with the Emperor of the Soul overseeing it, was nearly impossible to break. As time passed, the once thriving land of the Central Plains became desolate, a landscape that resembled the end of days. As the days turned into months, a growing sense of despair took hold of everyone. The aura within the blood clouds above became increasingly malevolent, and everyone knew that when the demon emerged from those clouds, it would likely mark the end of the Central Plains. But there was no one who could stop it. All they could do was watch helplessly as the blood aura in the sky grew thicker and darker. Blood clouds covering the sun, a catastrophe for the Central Plains. Under this catastrophe, life itself was in danger of extinction. The blood clouds had shrouded the Central Plains for 3 whole months, with no sign of weakening. During these 3 months, the once flourishing Central Plains had become desolate and dilapidated. Everyone frantically sought a safe place to hide. Some even burrowed underground, hoping this might allow them to survive the calamity. The thick blood clouds cloaked the sky of the Central Plains, filling the air with a nauseating stench of blood. The land was dyed red, and the viscous blood covered the earth, turning the Central Plains into a scene straight out of the netherworld. Pale white bones floated in the sea of blood, and faint, chilling wails seemed to echo across the heavens and the earth, sending shivers down anyone's spine. This level of slaughter was rare even in the history of the continent of Tuoshe. Typically, in any war, ordinary people were spared from direct involvement. Yet this time, the Soul Clan had gone mad. Their massacre knew no bounds, sparing no one regardless of identity or status. As they looked at the increasingly ominous blood clouds in the sky, the despair in people's hearts grew deeper. The longer this dragged on, the more terrifying the energy amassed within the grand formation. Everyone knew that once the Emperor of the Soul broke through, there would be no one in this world who could stop him. The entire land was enveloped in the shadow of death, filling everyone with a chilling sense of hopelessness. On a high platform, several figures stood, their gazes heavy as they looked through the massive protective shield that covered the sky, eventually focusing on the blood clouds that blanketed the horizon. The aura of the Emperor of the Soul is growing stronger. I can feel it. He's close to succeeding? Zhu Kuan finally broke the oppressive silence. Hearing this, the hearts of those present sank even further. Are we really just going to stand here and watch him complete the final step? Laying gritted his teeth, his voice filled with frustration. Over the past few months, they had been like turtles hiding within their shell, confined within the defensive shield. For someone with a fiery temperament like his, this was pure torture. The formation is complete. Just the energy accumulated within those blood clouds alone is enough to overwhelm us, let alone breaking in to fight the Emperor of the Soul. Gu Yuan shook his head, his eyes filled with deep helplessness. The power of the Emperor of the Soul had surpassed anything they could contend with. Merely surviving was already a significant challenge for them. Attacking was nothing short of a fantasy now. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but clench their fists in frustration. Even they were beginning to feel despair. What hope was there for anyone else? The area around the Alliance is rife with conflict as well. The factions seeking refuge are fighting each other to claim safer positions. Yin Jin sighed. Those worthless cowards. When we fought against the Soul Clan, they stood by and did nothing. Now that they're facing the consequences, they come crawling for protection. Laying snarled in anger. Everyone gave a bitter smile. How could these factions dare to intervene easily in the war between the Coalition and the Soul Clan? We shouldn't be too pessimistic. We still have hope. Gu Yuan encouraged with a smile. Hearing this, everyone seemed to remember that last glimmer of hope. A faint light flickered in their eyes. Indeed, they still had some hope left. Now, all we can do is pray that Xiao Yan successfully receives the Ancient Emperor's inheritance. Only then can we turn the tide. Otherwise, the Central Plains may be lost. With the image of the slender young man in his mind, Gu Yuan softly added, "But I believe that kid will perform miracles. If that happens, it would indeed be for the best." As if touched by Gu Yuan's words, the previously tense faces of several individuals gradually relaxed, and faint smiles appeared. Time passed slowly amidst the fear and despair of countless people. The blood clouds that shrouded the sky pressed down so heavily that it drove people to the brink of madness. 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, half a year. The blood clouds in the sky grew darker and thicker, sometimes becoming so dense that even sunlight struggled to penetrate them. During this time, more and more blood rays swept across the land. Each time they surged, they brought with them an overwhelming stench of blood. However, as more people flocked to the defensive shields set up by the Alliance, the terrifying blood rays gradually shifted their target. Eventually, they began to strike the shield itself. Fortunately, the Alliance had many powerful experts. Though they couldn't tear through the blood clouds, they managed to maintain the stability of the defensive shield. Of course, each time the blood rays struck the shield, it caused a wave of anxiety among those under its protection. After all, the shield was their only refuge. If the shield were to break, they would become just another set of corpses littering the ground. 6 months passed in a constant state of anxiety. During that time, no earth-shattering battles took place, but the oppressive bloodshed was enough to drive anyone mad. For 6 months, the blood clouds simply covered the central plains. No powerful members of the Soul clan appeared, and not even the voice of the Emperor of the Soul echoed through the heavens and earth. However, the ferocious aura from the Sea of Blood grew more terrifying as time went on. In the 7th month of the Grand Formation's envelopment of the Central Plains, the Sea of Blood in the distant sky finally began to stir. The blood sea churned, and a vortex emerged from within it. Then, a massive blood-colored lotus slowly rose from the Sea of Blood. Atop the blood lotus sat a figure, their blood-red hair cascading down like a waterfall, some strands even dipping into the Sea of Blood, floating on its surface like a demon spreading its wings. What intoxicating power! The figure's tightly closed eyes slowly opened, revealing a deep crimson that caused waves to surge across the blood sea. As the Emperor of the Soul opened his eyes, the space behind him twisted, and a figure engulfed in black flames appeared. The descendants of the Ling, Shi, and Yao clans have all been thrown into the blood pool. About 60 to 70% of the Soul clan's own descendants have also been sacrificed. Though this has stirred some discontent, Void-swallowing Flame said as he gazed at the blood-haired figure. The Emperor of the Soul's blood-red eyes flickered slightly, and then he smiled faintly. The blood lotus turned, and he looked directly at Void-swallowing Flame. As the Emperor of the Soul fixed his gaze on him, the black flames in Void-swallowing Flame's eyes flickered. He responded coolly, "What's the matter?" "It seems the energy in the Sea of Blood has a little extra something," the Emperor of the Soul said with a sly smile. "Oh." The black flames in Void-swallowing Flame's eyes flared up intensely. The Emperor of the Soul maintained his smile as he suddenly thrust his hand into the blood sea in front of him and violently grabbed. The entire sea churned, and strands of black light gathered in his palm, eventually forming a cluster of black flames. "If I were to absorb this, I'd likely be implanted with a devouring seed, wouldn't I?" The Emperor of the Soul chuckled, staring at the black flames before turning his gaze to Void-swallowing Flame. "It seems you're not on the same side as me, after all. You forced me to do this." A fierce light shot from Void-swallowing Flame's eyes. He abruptly pressed his hands onto the blood sea, and a wave of energy rippled out. Instantly, the blood sea surged as endless black flames erupted, furiously charging towards the Emperor of the Soul. "Attack!" As Void-swallowing Flame made his move, he suddenly let out a fierce shout. The surrounding space rippled, and dozens of figures appeared. Without hesitation, they all spat out dense black flames. These black flames quickly coalesced, eventually forming a bizarre formation above the blood sea, which descended directly towards the Emperor of the Soul. "Haha, it seems you've been secretly making preparations over the years. I didn't realize you had gained control over so many of these elders." The Emperor of the Soul seemed somewhat surprised upon seeing those familiar figures. Not just these elders. 70 to 80% of the Soul Clan members carry bloodline marks I've implanted. Did you really think I was unprepared? With just a thought, I could deal a severe blow to the Soul Clan. Void-swallowing Flame sneered. "I didn't want to do this, but since you harbored intentions of killing me, I had no choice but to strike first." "A severe blow?" The Emperor of the Soul chuckled and shook his head, but then his gaze suddenly turned icy. "As long as I'm here, The Soul Clan will never suffer any so-called severe blow. You think you can challenge me now? You're just courting death. The Emperor of the Soul suddenly stood up from the blood lotus, laughing wildly. He then opened his mouth wide, and an immense suction force erupted. The black flame formation descending upon him was immediately drawn into streams of fire and swallowed into his body. As the Emperor of the Soul made his move, a force that seemed to dominate heaven and earth erupted from within him. Instantly, the boundless sea of blood was thrown into a tumultuous upheaval. The blood sea beneath the dozens of Soul Clan elders surged, transforming into blood bubbles that enveloped them. The bubbles then contracted violently, and with a series of dull sounds, their bodies exploded into blood mist, which merged into the blood sea below. These powerful Soul Clan elders didn't even have time to react before they were wiped out by the Emperor of the Soul with a single hand. You've already succeeded? Feeling the overwhelming, heaven-defying aura, void-swallowing flame's expression finally showed signs of shock and fear. I succeeded half a month ago. I've just been waiting for you. The Emperor of the Soul licked his crimson lips and lightly gestured towards void-swallowing flame with his hand. To celebrate my becoming the first Do-D in millennia, why don't you hand over your origin flame? Emperor of the Soul, the lives of the Soul Clan members are all at my mercy. If you dare make a move, don't blame me for being ruthless. Void-swallowing flame shouted in fury. Hearing this, the Emperor of the Soul's hand paused slightly. He tilted his head and looked at void-swallowing flame with a peculiar expression, saying, "You've followed me for so long, and yet you still don't understand my nature?" A chill ran down void-swallowing flame's spine. He realized that this man would sacrifice anything to achieve his goals, even if that sacrifice meant the entire Soul Clan. Come here. However, just as void-swallowing flame came to this realization and attempted to flee, he was horrified to discover that his body had completely lost the ability to move. Explode! The Emperor of the Soul smiled as he lightly clenched his hand towards void-swallowing flame. Instantly, void-swallowing flame's body exploded, transforming into countless black flames that scattered in all directions. The Emperor of the Soul glanced at the fleeing black flames and opened his mouth wide, unleashing a powerful suction force. The black flames were quickly pulled back and swallowed entirely into his mouth. Your power now is nothing more than that of an ant to me. With almost no effort, the Emperor of the Soul absorbed void-swallowing flame. He elegantly wiped his lips with the back of his hand, his crimson lips appearing eerily sinister. Now, it seems it's time to deal with those troublesome ones, don't you think? The Emperor of the Soul's gaze turned towards the central plains, and a wicked smile crept across his face. Simultaneously, a voice filled with boundless bloodlust reverberated throughout the central plains. Remember this day, for it is the day I, the Emperor of the Soul, ascend to emperorhood. The Emperor of the Soul. He has succeeded. At the Alliance headquarters, Gu Yuan and Zhu Kuan's expressions changed drastically. They looked up in horror at the thick blood clouds beyond the protective shield. For the first time, they felt an aura that caused their very souls to tremble. Such an aura could only belong to a Do-D, a supreme being. And within those blood clouds, the only one who could have possibly become a Do-D was, without a doubt, the Emperor of the Soul. Today marks the day I, the Emperor of the Soul, ascend to emperorhood. As Gu Yuan and Zhu Kuan's expressions shifted, a powerful voice dripping with bloodlust descended from the heavens, echoing through every corner of the central plains. The Emperor of the Soul. At the mention of this name, now regarded as that of a demon, the area surrounding the Alliance headquarters erupted into chaos. Everyone stood up abruptly, their faces filled with fear as they looked towards the sky. While many were struck with terror, an urgent alarm sounded in the star realm. The sky was suddenly filled with a vast army of coalition forces who emerged from all directions, forming a massive, dark mass of warriors hovering in the sky. During the past 6 months, the coalition had clearly undergone extensive training. The way the army moved now exhibited much more coordination than before, and their collective aura was significantly more unified. As they looked at the vast army suspended in the sky, the previously chaotic crowd quieted down slightly. It seemed that the actions of the coalition forces provided a small measure of reassurance, though everyone knew that this sense of security was incredibly fragile. Gu Yuan, Zhu Kuan, and others also appeared at the front of the army at this moment, their faces heavy with concern as they looked up at the thick blood clouds beyond the protective shield. The scent of blood in the air seemed to grow even stronger, filling the heavens and earth. That aura, it's definitely the Emperor of the Souls. Gu Yuan took a deep breath, suppressing the unease and frustration in his heart. With a wave of his hand, he commanded in a deep voice, "Prepare the army." The massive coalition forces responded in unison, their collective voice resounding powerfully across the battlefield. If we can't stop him this time, the continent of Doqi will likely fall under the Emperor of the Soul's control, leading to untold suffering for all living beings. Yin Jin spoke gravely. This would likely be their final battle if nothing unexpected happened. Gu Yuan and the others nodded in silence. The Emperor of the Soul, wielding the power of a Do Di, could single-handedly contend against the coalition. If they weren't careful, this long-drawn war might end today. Any news from Xiao Yan? Lang asked. Not yet, Gu Yuan replied slowly, shaking his head. The ancient emperor's inheritance is no trivial matter. It will take time, and we don't have much of that left. But we're running out of time, Lang said with a bitter smile. Gu Yuan remained silent for a moment before responding. It's not that I don't want to notify him. You all know that Xiao Yan is our only hope. Only by successfully advancing to Do Di can he possibly challenge the Emperor of the Soul. If we call him out prematurely, it will be in vain, and we'll only end up squandering our last hope. Yin Jin and the others sighed softly and nodded in agreement, understanding the truth in Gu Yuan's words. We've secretly relocated some of our younger clan members. At least this way, our bloodlines can be preserved to some extent. Even if we fail today, as long as Xiao Yan succeeds, our 3 clans' bloodlines can still continue, Gu Yuan said solemnly. So, under no circumstances should we summon Xiao Yan before he has completed his task. You're right. We'll follow your lead. The Lei clan has never been afraid of death. Even if that scum, the Emperor of the Soul, has become a Do Di, we'll still dare to confront him, Lang said, gritting his teeth and cupping his fists in resolve. Gu Yuan smiled faintly, feeling his inner turmoil gradually settle. He looked up at the thick blood clouds above, knowing that now was the moment for the coalition to stand together, for better or worse. As the coalition forces braced themselves, the blood clouds that covered the sky remained motionless, the thick scent of blood permeating the air. However, this eerie calm didn't bring any relief. Everyone could feel the looming storm about to break. The oppressive silence persisted for about an hour before the blood clouds, which had shrouded the central plains for nearly half a year, finally began to stir. Under countless watchful eyes, the blood clouds slowly parted, and with a whooshing sound, countless figures riding on black mist surged forth from within the clouds, eventually hovering outside the massive defensive shield, their cold gazes fixed on the sea of people below. The Soul Clan has finally arrived. Seeing the overwhelming army, many faces turned pale. Although they had long anticipated this moment, the reality of it still filled their hearts with endless fear and despair. The Soul Clan's army hovered in the sky without uttering a word, watching the countless figures within the defensive shield like a pack of wolves. Suddenly, the army parted, forming a path, and a blood-red figure slowly approached from the distance. This figure transformed into a blood lotus, which hovered before the Soul Clan's army, exuding an overwhelming aura of bloodlust. Atop the blood lotus sat a figure with long, blood-red hair, cascading down like a waterfall. As he appeared, the stench of blood in the air grew so intense that it began to condense into droplets, falling from the sky like a torrential rain. The blood rain fell relentlessly on the defensive shield, creating a terrifying scene that chilled everyone to the bone. The Emperor of the Soul. Gu Yuan and the others stared intently at the figure seated on the blood lotus, their fists clenched tightly. That aura, it was terrifying. Gu Yuan, you've lost? The Emperor of the Soul sat on the blood lotus, his long blood-red hair fluttering in the breeze. His crimson eyes gazed at Gu Yuan and the others within the defensive shield, a smile on his lips as he spoke slowly. Gu Yuan's eyes darkened as he shouted, "Emperor of the Soul, the ancient clans have long agreed not to harm ordinary people during wars. Your actions will bring down divine retribution." What a ridiculous notion. The Emperor of the Soul chuckled lightly, then slowly stood up from the blood lotus, surveying the land below him like a ruler of the world. "Now, I've transcended this world. Who can bring retribution upon me? Rules are made by the strong. From now on, the continent of Doqi belongs to the Soul Clan." The Emperor of the Soul's voice, filled with endless bloodlust, echoed through the heavens and earth, causing more and more faces to turn ashen. With the Soul Clan's methods, if they were to control the continent of Doqi, the days to come would be filled with endless fear and terror. "In this war, I am the final victor." The eyes of Emperor of the Soul gleamed with a blood-red light. Without hesitation, he extended his hand, aiming at the protective barrier below, which had shielded countless lives. Then, he clenched his fist abruptly. "Gu Yuan, as my former rival, today I will show you the true power of a Do-Di." As his voice fell, the blood rain in the heavens suddenly gathered together, forming an incredibly fine bloodline, which then shot across the sky like lightning. Where the bloodline passed, a massive black rift, tens of thousands of feet long, appeared in the sky. The very space itself was torn apart, and at the same time, the protective barrier, constructed by the combined efforts of the Sky Mansion Alliance's powerful warriors, shattered almost without a ripple, exploding before the stunned gazes of all present. As they watched the last refuge vanish, everyone was left in shock, letting the blood rain fall upon their bodies, the stench of blood reminding them of the death that was now imminent. With just a casual gesture, the defense built by Gu Yuan, Zhu Kuan, and numerous other powerful allies crumbled. As Gu Yuan and the others stared at the shattered barrier, their expressions turned extremely grim. Even they felt a chill at the terrifying power the Emperor of the Soul now wielded. "Form the array." Gu Yuan's face was somber as he rose into the air, shouting fiercely. Even if they knew they were no match, they had to fight to the bitter end. Hearing Gu Yuan's command, the tightly packed alliance troops roared in unison, their shouts shaking the heavens. Torrents of Do-Chi erupted from their bodies, so overwhelming that even the blood clouds covering the sky were slightly dispersed. Ancient Emperor Mirror. Suspended within the boundless Do-Chi, Gu Yuan's hands formed intricate seals, condensing the Do-Chi into a colossal ancient energy mirror, spanning tens of thousands of feet. With the Do-Chi of so many powerful warriors condensed into it, the mirror immediately began to radiate a terrifying wave of destruction that sent shivers down one's spine. Understanding the strength of the Emperor of the Soul, Gu Yuan and his allies knew they had to unleash their most powerful attack from the start, combining the strength of so many warriors and using the array formation to wield such a dreadful offensive. As the energy mirror appeared, Gu Yuan spat out a mouthful of essence blood, which sprinkled onto the mirror, causing it to glow with a radiant light. Gu Yuan's expression was grave as he continued to weave his hands in a complex pattern. Finally, the energy mirror trembled violently, and a colossal beam of light, spanning tens of thousands of feet, suddenly shot out from the mirror's surface, obliterating even the air it passed through. The beam of light nearly pierced through the entire sky, visible throughout the entire central plains. Everyone's hearts were in their throats at this moment. Surely, not even the Emperor of the Soul could easily withstand such a powerful attack. Under the gaze of countless eyes, the Emperor of the Soul, standing on his blood-colored lotus, merely smiled coldly. His blood-red pupils reflected the terrifying light beam approaching from below, and then he raised a single finger and lightly pointed forward. Shatter! With that single word, the beam of light, which had been raging like an angry dragon, suddenly halted just a few feet away from the Emperor of the Soul. His finger, light as a feather, touched the beam. There was no energy ripple, no explosion. Yet, under the astonished gazes of all those present, the terrifying light beam crumbled inch by inch, eventually bursting into countless fragments of light that fell gently from the sky. Gu Yuan, in this war, I am the final winner. The Emperor of the Soul gazed down from above at Gu Yuan, whose face had turned ashen. He smiled faintly and spoke slowly.